The CEO had everything a man could dream of: power, wealth, respect, and a reputation so strong that no one dared question his decisions. But for all his control over the business world, there were still moments where his life slipped into chaos. One of those moments came when his younger brother, Daniel, announced his wedding and casually mentioned that his bride's family expected to meet everyone, including the CEO's wife. The problem: the CEO didn't have one. Alexander Knight was too busy running his billion-dollar empire to think about marriage. Relationships were messy, distracting, and usually ended with someone wanting his money. He avoided commitment like the plague. But this time, there was no escape. His brother's fiancée came from a traditional family, and they believed in appearances. They wanted to meet Alexander's wife, the woman who had supposedly been supporting him from the shadows. Daniel had once lied to make things easier for his bride's family, and now the lie had spun out of control. And so Alexander, the cold and calculated CEO, had a deadline. He needed a fake wife, and fast. His assistant, Claire, had been searching discreetly for someone suitable, someone who wouldn't create complications. But Alexander wasn't interested in an actress or a model who might sell his secret later. He wanted someone simple, trustworthy, and invisible enough not to cause trouble. That was when fate intervened. One evening, as Alexander was leaving the office, he noticed a woman sitting on the steps outside the building. She wore a plain dress, her hair pulled into a messy bun, and she clutched a folder like her life depended on it. Her shoes were worn, her hands trembling as if she hadn't eaten all day. But her eyes, wide, soft, and filled with quiet determination, caught his attention. She stood up nervously when she saw him. "Mr. Knight, I applied for a job. The receptionist said my resume wasn't accepted. But I really need this. Please, please look at it once." Alexander never entertained random pleas. He had bodyguards for a reason, and people begging outside his office wasn't new. But something about her made him pause. Maybe it was the way her voice cracked when she begged, or the way she still held her head high despite her desperation. "What's your name?" he asked. "Isabella," she whispered. "Isabella Reed." He should have walked away, but instead, he found himself staring at her for a moment longer. She wasn't like the polished socialites he met every day. She was raw, unfiltered, genuine. And in that instant, an idea struck him. The next morning, he called her back. "You want a job? Fine. But it won't be what you expect. I need someone to play a role, temporarily. In return, I'll pay you more than you can imagine." Isabella frowned. "A role? My wife," Alexander said flatly. "For my brother's wedding." Her eyes widened. "Excuse me. You want me to pretend to be your wife?" "Yes. Just for the wedding. Just long enough to convince a family that I'm happily married. You'll stay in my house, learn a few things, attend the event, and then it's over." Isabella stared at him like he had lost his mind. "Why me?" Alexander's jaw tightened. He didn't want to admit it, but she was perfect. She had no connections to his world, no reason to exploit him, and she looked ordinary enough to be believable. But deep inside, he also couldn't deny that she had a kind of quiet beauty that drew him in. "Because," he finally said, "you're desperate enough to say yes." And he was right. Isabella had been struggling to pay rent, juggling 3 part-time jobs, and carrying the weight of her sick mother on her shoulders. She couldn't afford pride, not anymore. So she agreed. What Isabella didn't expect was the transformation that followed. His staff gave her clothes, makeup, and lessons in etiquette. The plain, worn-out girl she had always been slowly disappeared, replaced by a woman who could easily pass for the wife of a billionaire. When she looked in the mirror, even she couldn't believe what she saw. But the most shocking part wasn't her reflection. It was the way Alexander looked at her. The first time she walked down the grand staircase of his mansion in an evening gown, his eyes lingered. His cold, sharp features softened for just a moment, and he forgot to breathe. "You clean up, better than expected," he muttered, his voice low, almost strained. Her cheeks warmed. She wanted to believe it was a compliment, even if it didn't sound like one. The days before the wedding were filled with rehearsals, walking together, practicing introductions, memorizing fake stories about how they met. At first, it was just business. Alexander was distant, commanding, always correcting her mistakes. But slowly, the lines began to blur. He started noticing the little things: The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the way she laughed softly when she thought no one was watching, the way she always tried to help the staff even though she didn't have to. And Isabella, despite herself, started seeing him differently too. Beneath the armor of arrogance and authority, he was lonely. The empire he built had left him surrounded by people, but none of them truly knew him. For the first time, she wondered what it must be like to carry so much power and yet have no one to lean on. The wedding weekend arrived faster than either of them expected. The grand ballroom was filled with chandeliers, flowers, and hundreds of guests in glittering attire. Isabella walked in, holding Alexander's arm, her nerves nearly overwhelming her. But the moment they stepped inside, the room hushed. She was breathtaking. Every guest turned their head, whispering about how stunning Alexander's wife was. His brother nearly dropped his champagne glass when he saw her. And Alexander, cold, controlled, untouchable Alexander, couldn't stop staring at her himself. "She's beautiful," Daniel whispered, still in shock. For the rest of the evening, Alexander played his role perfectly. He held her close, whispered in her ear, brushed kisses against her hand. But what unsettled him most was that none of it felt like acting anymore. When Isabella smiled at him, his chest tightened. When she leaned her head against his shoulder, it felt natural. Too natural. By the end of the night, Alexander found himself outside on the balcony, trying to make sense of the storm inside him. That was when Isabella joined him. "You did well tonight," he said quietly. "So did you," she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. He looked at her for a long moment, his voice husky when he finally spoke. "I thought this would just be an arrangement. I thought you'd be a name, a face, nothing more. But tonight, Isabella, you didn't feel like a stranger." Her heart pounded. She wanted to deny it, to remind herself it was all fake. But the way he looked at her, as if she was the only woman in the world, made denial impossible. That night, when he touched her hand, it wasn't part of the deal. When he leaned closer, his lips just inches from hers, it wasn't rehearsed. And when he kissed her, slow, deep, filled with emotions neither of them wanted to admit, it was real. The CEO had gone looking for a fake wife. What he found was something he never believed he needed, a woman who could reach the part of his heart he had locked away for years. And Isabella, the poor girl who thought she was just playing a role, realized she had walked into a story that was never meant to end.